it's not exactly a secret of mine that I'm a pretty big fan of Love Live. It's not the type of anime I would usually get into, but for whatever reason, I gave it a shot, and now 8 years later, here I am still watching it. Except, I do fall into probably one of the weirder categories of Love Live fans. The type that obviously enjoyed the show, enjoyed enough to collect merch, but just don't care for the music. Yeah. The whole central pillar this media franchise revolves around and is meant to promote, I just don't care for it. Sure, when an episode suddenly turns into a music video, I'm still having a good time cause they're not bad songs, but you'll never catch me listening to them outside watching the show. It's just not my thing. So, when for the longest time, every Love Live game to have come out was a rhythm game, where I imagine a lot of the enjoyment you're supposed to get from them is from your love of the songs, I had very little reason for me to go out and play them. Especially when rhythm games already don't interest me all that much in general. Out of curiosity, I did download School Idol Festival shortly after I got into the franchise, but unsurprisingly, I got bored of it after just 1 or 2 days. And that would have been the last time I ever played a Love Live game. That was until this came out. Yohane the Parhelion Blaze in the Deep Blue. A bit of a convoluted name, so for simplicity, I'll just be referring to it as Deepblue for this video. Seeing this game get announced last year, I think caught every Love Live fan off guard, me included. When almost every other game in your franchise is some rhythm game for mobile, a Metroidvania coming out on consoles and PC is a pretty big change of pace. And considering the fate of all those mobile games, I think it's a good thing to see this franchise branch out with these other endeavors. I was pretty happy to finally have a Love Live game to be excited about, especially when the lead character here was going to be Yoshiko, or Yohane as she prefers to be called. She's my second favorite character in the series, so her getting to be the star of this game, well, that just made the whole idea of this even better. And by the way, if you're wondering just how exactly we suddenly went from singing and dancing anime girls just a moment ago to now fighting the fish man from the fishing hamlet, it's a spinoff. Just don't worry about it, okay? I should probably say at this point that this game was developed by Inti Creates, which, to be honest, before playing this, that name didn't really mean a whole lot to me, but looking into what other stuff they worked on, clearly this was a studio I should have been more familiar with, cause I saw a lot of games I recognized. Azure Striker Gunvolt, Bloodstained, Mega Man, Gun. Maybe you're not familiar with Love Live, but I'd wager you've heard of at least one of these. So, this random ass Metroidvania spinoff for some idol anime, it wasn't just thrown together by some no-name studio. Nah, they got people with some pedigree here. And if such a studio is behind this game, then maybe it might be worth checking out, even if you don't care for Love Live. Well, I'm not exactly making this video because I think this is some hidden gem that even non-Love Live fans should play. I'm glad the game exists because I now get this opportunity to talk about a series I otherwise likely wouldn't make a full video on, but for me to say that I can recommend this game, I'm gonna have to put a lot of asterisks next to that statement. To start this off on a positive note, I will say this game looks quite nice, especially all the different environments, which are such a joy to look at. They're fun, they're colorful, like tell me you wouldn't want to just chill in some of these places. Some of my personal highlights include the Egyptian themed level, which has all these ruins with fish hieroglyphics on them, A+ on the environmental design there. And then there's the penultimate level, which is far and away my favorite visually, because of all these writhing tentacles that really adds to the creepy atmosphere. Those look super cool. And it's such a stark contrast to what you would normally associate with Love Live, that it's funny to think that this is a thing that exists. Also, not to go on a tangent here, but this level is the one thing in this game that kinda justifies me releasing this video on Halloween. Well, that and the fact that Yohane calls herself a fallen angel, which is basically like a demon, right? So, I guess that counts. I don't know. Does this spark fear in you? Honestly, this was just a video I was waiting to release after I was done with the blog, and it just so happened that I could release this on Halloween, hence the theming. This isn't like a spooky game or anything. Except for this creepy ass enemy which legitimately jump scared me the first time I saw it. Dude, the way that it's animated, I love it, but at the same time, I hate it.
It's disgusting. What is that? Is that Branson? Is that a tap dancing crab demon? Is that Nightmare? Is that true Nightmare?
Speaking of being well animated, the same goes for Yohane. Just look at the crouching animation. They could have made something basic, but they went the extra step and made something with some character. It's cute. That brings me to how the sprite work in general is really solid. I love all the enemy designs, from the gallisopod looking dudes, the cute mudfish, all of the bosses. There's even some rare enemies you can find, all based off of nigiri. That in itself is pretty amusing, but then I found out that if you use either Riko's fire attacks on them, well, instead of showing it, I'll let you guess what happens next. So to all the artists and animators who worked on this game, y'all did a great job. And really, they weren't the only ones, because the game can be pretty fun, even if the combat is quite basic. There's a weapon crafting system here that gives you access to various weapon types, but apart from crossbows and whips, which provide some range, every other weapon class effectively plays the same, with the only thing really mattering being this number right here. As far as I know, there aren't any cool weapons with special bonuses, so just pick whatever does the most damage and have at it. Besides your craftable weapons, your companions you pick up along the way will also be providing you with a variety of new attacks and abilities. They all have a starting ability, and then a secondary one you can unlock once you've fulfilled a side quest for them, with this always being a fetch quest for one of these items you'll find locked away, requiring another member to unlock it. Pretty simple stuff, as these are hard to miss and easy to figure out what you need. Apart from the Mario one, I had to look it up to find out I needed to use Ruby here. Some of these are just to progress through new parts of the map, but the rest all offer some combat utility, granted with varying degrees of usefulness. At least from my experience, I'd say Hanamaru, Riko, Mari, and Daya are all likely to be part of your usual rotation. Hanamaru's laptop explosion does a fuckload of damage, so if you can position her right, she's a great boss killer. Riko's fire attacks are a solid option if you want something with some range. Mari has both a ranged attack and the most OP ability in the game with her time stop. I was actually quite sad I didn't get much time to use her, as she's also one of my favorite characters, but I think for balancing reasons, they made her one of the last characters you can get, if not the very last. And then there's Daya, who was my favorite summon to use in the game. Her saver attacks are quite snappy when compared to almost every other attack, which made them fun to spam. The same goes for her bike attack, which is not only extremely spammable, but it also does a ton of damage while covering a long distance, thus making it great for maintaining a safe distance from a boss. Just be careful while spamming it, as it will consume from your magic meter. Every attack apart from Lilaps Swipe, in fact. But that's what the magic potions are for. As for the other half of the cast here, Kanan is outclassed as a ranged option, since her big weird frog robot can be kind of awkward to gauge where it will land, so she's relegated to being an HM slave essentially. Chica's stun gun I pretty much only used for the second boss, when she was my one option I had available to me. And then Yo and Ruby, while they have their uses, I just didn't care for them. Gameplay wise at least, because, for the record, Yo is low-key tied with Yoshiko as my favorite Aqua member. Moving on to the game's difficulty, well, considering the source material here, Love Live ain't exactly the most hardcore franchise out there. It would be pretty funny if this game were actually quite tough. maybe it makes more sense to not make it too hard to entice Love Live fans that normally wouldn't play this type of game to check it out anyway. And that ended up being the case. Well, I'm not sure if that was the exact reason, but the game is definitely on the easier side. Money is extremely plentiful, so at no point should you be unable to afford health and magic potions or any type of buff. The game is also very generous with its many checkpoints that will heal you back to full at the minor cost of spawning back defeated enemies. If somehow you do find yourself at low health, you're never gonna be too far from one of these safe rooms. And even then, you can fast travel to them at any point. So you really shouldn't be dying all that often, if at all, while you're out combing through each level. There are some tougher enemies you'll find deeper into the game that you do have to be careful against, specifically these, but they are so sparsely utilized, they never really become any sort of major hurdle. The only part of the game that will present some challenge are the boss fights. If you go into them unprepared and fight them recklessly, as if you're still dealing with regular enemies, you'll definitely have to retry a couple of times. I was breezing through the early game up until the second boss, which was this horseshoe crab dude. And this is where I found out, oh crap, I actually have to try in this game. Having to time Chica's stun gun at the right time to be able to get some swipes in, having to avoid all of its attacks that cover the arena, I really did have to learn to fight for me to get past it. I mean, don't get me wrong, it wasn't anything crazy, only took me like 3 tries, but considering just how much of a step up it was when compared to the tutorial boss, that's when I knew this game wouldn't be a complete cakewalk. From here on out, bosses were always putting up a good fight, especially the final one. But that's only because I ended up setting restrictions for myself. Yeah, bosses are significantly tougher than regular enemies, but very quickly I learned just how easy this game makes it to where even they could be trivialized. So, there's this little thing called the musical score. This is a semi-rare drop you can get from enemies while you're out exploring the game. And what it does is that if you were to die, it will immediately revive you, and for a full minute, your attacks will always crit while not consuming from your magic meter. So, if you're in the middle of a boss fight and this thing triggers, it's like, oh cool, I guess I win now, cause you can just spam all your specials without consequence. You do still take damage, but it's not too hard to just maintain your distance with some of these bosses and spam things like Daya's Bike or Rico's Flame. Since I wouldn't usually die outside of boss fights, if I had this thing on me, it would only trigger during them and it'll just remove all the fun. After beating one too many bosses with it, I made it a point to avoid grabbing it whenever it would drop. However, I found out after beating the game that you can pop this thing whenever you want, so if you do grab one, I would suggest just popping it right then and there, unless you want to shred through whatever next boss you encounter. Like with me avoiding using this one item, I also had to start doing a similar thing with how many health potions I would have going into boss fights. If I really wanted to, I could have been carrying around a dozen plus potions with me at all times and beating every boss first try. Clearly, these had some good work go into them. I wanted to enjoy the fight for what it offered, and not just plow through it. So, I would purposely only have at most one health potion for each fight. I didn't mind retrying a couple times, even when I knew I could have just bought some heals and gone the boss over with. Nah, I wanted some amount of challenge from this game, and this was more fun for me. And when I did just want to get a boss over with, i.e. the final one that I kept dying to, then I loaded up so I could just beat the game right then and there. I had seen enough, I wasn't gonna feel any better at that point if I continued to try and beat it with these self-imposed restrictions. Doing all this, I always kept the game at this sweet spot where it wasn't a complete cakewalk, nor a full-on challenge run. Yes, the game is still overall quite easy, but at least for those of us who want something harder, it's not very hard to tweak some things and get something more enjoyable. Deepblue, as stupidly easy as it can get, I'll never actually say that's its biggest problem. Hell, I'll even argue later on it can be a positive. No. What really sets this whole thing back is that it's way too short. it took me just a little over 13 hours for me to 100% this game. And that's on the slower end, since from what I've seen, most people are able to 100% it closer to 10 hours. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with a game being short, but when you're charging $30 for it, or $42 for a physical copy, then yeah, I would like for your game to have a bit more. Like, I don't mind paying a little extra for something shorter if it's to support an indie dev, or if it's just a really good game, especially if I'm paying for a physical copy. But in this case, even with my attachment to the IP here, it's a bit of a hard sell at that price point. I actually knew going into this game it was going to be really short, so this was a purchase I only really justified because I could then make a video out of it. Like, sure, I'll bite the bullet here. I know I'll at least have some fun making a video out of this, but that's just me. Steam had it on sale for $16 at one point while working on this, which is just about the right price of what you should pay, considering what all you get. Price aside, this game would have just benefited as a whole if it had just a bit more going on. Some more stages would have given you extra opportunities to use some of your late game summons you might not get much time with, and provided more room to justify some of the bonus effects from some of the defensive gear you can craft. Seriously, I made this early on, only to find out there are only like 3 little spots in the whole game you can get frozen. At least the buff to my magic meter made it worth it. But also, I do realize this game has 1 level for each companion you find, plus 2 endgame stages, so maybe that's all they were able to put together. So if I had to suggest any improvements to this game, apart from more levels, I will say that I think there's plenty of room to expand on what was already here. Those endgame stages, yeah, they barely count, cause they really skimped out on them. The penultimate area, the one with the creepy tentacles I liked, as cool as that area may look, playing through it turned out to be a real disappointment. This is a Metroidvania. I expect all the levels here to have all these winding paths. So why is the second to last area, what is supposed to be the final challenge before the boss rush and final boss, effectively just one straight line? If anything, this should be the most complex level in the game. What the hell? Why is it the easiest one to navigate through? And yeah, this is immediately followed up by a boss rush. And not a very exciting one at that. If you die to a boss here, you can just try again without having the bosses reset, so it's not very challenging. If they had to put a boss rush here, I think they should have at least made it to where you had to beat 4 in a row, and then that would unlock a checkpoint to split up the 8 bosses. With endgame gear, and with how much money this game throws at you for potions and buffs, I don't think it would have been that much of a difficulty spike. It would have at least made this a bit more interesting. But I would have still just preferred a proper level in place of all of this. This game is also lacking in any cool secret content and replay value, apart from a full-on challenge run, so I have an idea to remedy that. So those sushi enemies I brought up earlier, those dudes are the one thing in this game that would kinda count as secret, except they aren't all that well hidden. There are chests with crafting materials more hidden than they are, and those aren't very exciting. I say, forget the treasure chests, hide the sushi guys better in several tough to reach parts of the map, and have it so when you beat all of them, that unlocks some new goofy sushi themed weapon you can use in New Game Plus. And since there's 3 variations of them, maybe you could do 3 different weapons. Do this, and now you've instantly added replay value, further encouraged exploration, and turned the best enemies in the game into something beyond just a quick goof. Improve the endgame, have literally any kind of incentive for a replay, and this game, while still a bit pricey and on the vanilla side, gets way better. I finished this game wanting more because for what it was, I had fun with it. There just wasn't a whole lot to do. So to finish this off, would I actually recommend this game? Assuming you get it at a discount. Only if you fall into at least one of the following 3 categories. Are you a Love Life fan? Yes? Okay, moving on. Second category are those who maybe want to get into Metroidvanias, but aren't too familiar with these types of games. Sometimes easier games do have merit in that they can act as entry points for people wanting to get into that genre. What I saw as negatives about this game, maybe someone else will be glad that it's so forgiving. So I'll say, if you're wanting to play the Winnie Hut Jr. of Metroidvanias, Deepblue might just be what you're looking for. Cause otherwise, if you're not afraid of some difficulty, just play Hollow Knight. That's the one other Metroidvania I've played in recent memory, so it's the only one I can recommend, but man, it is such an easy recommendation. It's half the price with way more stuff to do, and it's genuinely just a great game. Lastly, if you're really itching to play any Metroidvania, as long as it's half decent, then yeah, Deepblue will scratch that itch. Play it on your Switch, your Steam Deck, cause it's the perfect play for an hour before going to bed type of game. Knock it out over the course of a week and a half, you'll have some fun with it. Otherwise, if you don't fall under one of these categories, I'm sure there's a ton of other great Metroidvanias better worth your money. Yohane, 10 out of 10 character. As for her game, not so much. And yes, I am aware she has more than one game. Yes, I did briefly consider making this a double review, but no, I spent more than enough making this video. Will I play it someday? I don't know, maybe, but I doubt I'd review it. I can at least say this game ended up being better than its anime counterpart. I watched it after beating this, not just cause I was already meaning to watch it, but to see if it would add any extra context to this game's practically non-existent story. But I would rather take no story over whatever the hell that anime was. I'm sorry, but that's been the one season of Love Live I haven't really cared for. It started out promising, but then, I don't really want to talk about it. I like the opening, I like Mari's portrayal, not much else. Maybe season 2 will be better. And maybe if this game gets a sequel, that will also be a bit better. Flesh this out a bit more, make it more challenging, and I think you have something pretty good. But if and when that day comes, what we did get, considering this is some licensed game for some idol anime, it could have been way worse. Knowing a studio that seems to specialize in these types of games made it, I would have maybe expected a bit more, but hey, what can you do? Again, I'm glad the game exists, gave me a chance to talk about Love Live, and as much as I may complain about its price, I would rather have more of these types of games than mobile games that will just end up biting the dust in due time. And I think on that note, I will end the video. Thanks for watching.